There we go. All right, I got the player time. Cool. Well, welcome to the post show. This is the after show for HSRPM. You can watch the whole show and all 3 hours of it, or however long we're on here for this next part. But if you don't want to, this will be available just as the post show element there, whatever. I don't know why I got an LA Times notification. Oh, whatever. So welcome to the show, and let's start working on sort of questions and what you guys might want to talk about. Winners have to pick up the ticket at the station. This is true. I could use a plug for my campaign. I have 3 days left to make it to the general. I'm on Twitter, Kurt for Congress, Act Blue, and GoFundMe. There you go. So yeah, you guys, I'll let's see, Kurt for Congress. Hold on 1 second. Hold on. Gotta open that up. Don't freeze on me, you jerk. That's always weird. Hopefully we're okay. Oh, there we go. Okay. Yeah. Let's go to Twitter and look up Kurt for Congress and see if we can do a little boost there. Search Twitter. There you go. Kurt Wilson. There he is. There you go. There you go. There you go. Okay, Kurt. So, I'm forwarding some of this. Let's see. There you go. Okay, there you go. I just retweeted 2 of your things, Kurt. There you go. Hopefully that helps. Get you started. It was interesting here in the talk about Obama saying he was 10 years ahead of his time, or maybe even 20, and after having after going through the stuff with Queer as Folk, like I feel like I get in working with everybody in the cast and the writers and all that. Like that's kind of I think the general feeling that everybody working on QAF had, that it had, and so that it was kind of like it ended up being very pivotal for a lot of people, and yet at the same time, it gets forgotten in sort of the elements of history or pushed back on. And so, I mean, it's hard to kind of wrap your head around, because it's like my experience of it day to day is I run into lots of people daily that were positively affected by the show, or and all that kind of stuff. But the general public, if you're trying to move them along, it had it was obviously ahead of its time, or it wouldn't have been as crucial or as important. And I think the Obama presidency is the same kind of circumstance in that it required the country was not ready for its first black president when he was president, but the act of him being our first black president was a necessary step towards us getting there. I don't necessarily think we get there quicker if he isn't the first black president, if that makes sense. That it just keeps punting, and we could continue to lie to ourselves in the same way that I think the first female president will have that same kind of effect. Do I think she'll be treated with the kind of same vitriol that Obama experienced? Probably not. Do I think if she's a Democrat, will she? And there's no reason to believe she would be. If she's a Democrat, will the left be? Will they take a "we must hold her feet to the fire" attitude towards her, or would we just or just will people have learned their lesson from the Obama administration and be more supportive? It's hard to say. I'm not 100% trusting in any of these circumstances about this stuff, and that's why I think it's actually more important that you manage your citizenry, that your own citizenship. You take an active position, you know. Yeah, so I'm going back through reading your chats. It's hard to quantify groundbreaking in hindsight. Yeah, absolutely, Charles. It's really hard to grasp. I have a real hard time with Obama saying that. I don't think he's wrong in saying it. But here's the thing: being ahead of your time entails a lot of damage and pain, and you're out on. They call it out on a limb for a reason, because it's easy for it to crack and for you to fall. And Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, they were all ahead of their time, and they died for it. Was the country ready for their message? No. That's why the message was necessary. Was the country ready for its first black president? No. That's why it was necessary. Helen, you guys are more economical than a psychotherapist. Oh, yeah. That's right. Losing the vote by 3 million and winning the electoral college is not something that happens without interference. I would agree with that. I also think that just this, I won't ever, I don't know anybody who expects me to bend on this kind of, third-party nonsense or this butter emails crowd that would ever go, yeah, you just, she's probably going to win, so why bother voting? Like, no, you don't. You're responsible. You're a responsible adult. We are still one nation controlled by the media. I disagree. I think we hand over that control. I don't think we're controlled by anything. If we believe something, we choose. It's because we choose to believe it. If we don't act, it's not because the media drove us not to act. It's because we didn't act. And in those circumstances, even when there's tons of evidence to support the conclusion, the idea that you would say, well, it's system's bigger than I are responsible. Like I just can't go there in my life. Abdicating personal responsibility is not in my bloodstream. Where did I get that cool Chicago shirt you wore last week? Oh, I got it in the Hancock Tower. We went up to the Hancock Tower and they were selling it in the lobby there. It was just really cool. Tom, America was built on racism, had a constitution based on racism, fought a war of racism against itself, kept from racism, so we can't be surprised when racism raised its ugly head again. Partly true, Billy, but you also had a country that, half the country was fighting on the side of abolitionism. The 2/3, or 3/5, whatever, that was a mitigatory balance between the people who did believe in full humanity. For both natives and were anti-slavery. You don't have a civil war unless you have people who are willing to take up arms to end slavery. I think America isn't necessarily built on racism the way it has been at the forefront of dealing with the world's racism. And we're the battlefield for a lot of it, because in a lot of other countries it just still exists. So I don't necessarily think we're built on racism. I don't necessarily buy that, and I think we are only that when we abdicate our responsibility and are standing up to racism, and going, well, we're fine now, or things are okay now, or whatever. So if Trump got in, what's the no, you don't give that ground. And if you have actually I'm just saying there's a value, whatever your belief system is, if it leads you to not being motivated to make the country better or live up to its standards, then it's a useless ideology. If ultimately it does make you push towards making us a more inclusive society, then, it matters not. How does it mean that we have to be vigilant and vociferous in the fight against this stuff? Yeah, I agree. But here's the thing. That's the problem with writing it off as a racist country, or racist to the core, or systemically racist, and using terms like that. Because what ultimately happens is you make the racists feel like they own more ground than they do. This is the argument about why radical Islamic terrorism, or saying all Muslims and that kind of thing. That once you do that, if you let ISIS take credit for every bomber or shooter that exists, then ISIS seems to be bigger than they are, and their mandate grows inexorably based on that belief system. But if you go, no, actually, racist, you're a lonely person. The majority of people don't agree with you. Most people in that Starbucks were horrified at how those guys were treated, and the woman behind the counter was alone in her behavior. And I think it is, that is the reality. And if you say, well, everybody's racist and they're just carrying their racism around all the time, what you do is that's not a politically inert statement, and it certainly doesn't win hearts and minds or make people feel like you're the person to talk to or engage with on a political level. Because if you're trying to win them over to your political ideology, what you're effectively saying is you're not welcome. And the only way we gain ground is that if there is, you guys know this. I mean, I talk about this all the time. So why don't, in my stand-up act, I don't buy homophobia or Islamophobia or, because it's not an illness. These people are bigots. Call them bigots. If some things aren't offensive, they're bigoted, they're prejudiced. Call them that. Because if you just make something phobic, then anybody who's, weirded out by any random stranger suddenly falls into the category of, they're on Team Ku Klux Klan. And then the Klan goes, see, look how many people are in my camp. And when half those people are like, I'm not in that guy's camp. You made it look like I am, but I'm not. Hal has closed down the show for an hour to have a discussion about race. Yeah, it's kind of true. But I think it's important. Yo momophobia, it's the worst kind, Billy. It is. Let's see. When you have 60 million people voting for Trump, that's a sizable number, and the racism of Donald Trump is already hard to miss unless you just wanted to. No question. But again, Hillary won the popular vote, and this is, if it's just America is, then you just deny the existence of all the people who voted against him with a lot of concern and deference in their heart. I don't believe that how the white race's reaction is a daily reality in the U.S. Chris Hayes, Tory did a show on that on MSNBC. Yeah, but I know it's a daily reality. That doesn't mean that that the rest of the country is okay with that. I went to farmers market and then registered voters. We were met with polite ambivalence. Do you have any advice for us? Yeah. Well, I mean, I think keep at it, because that's going to be the response for a lot of people, and because people are walking around with a lot on their minds and all that kind of stuff, and is persistence. That's always got to be. I'm not hopeless here in Georgia. We ignore Klan marches when they occur, and they stopped here. Yeah. The Electoral College has got to go. I agree with that. I think that's just a land ownership-based form of electoral politics. America will never reach its true potential for everyone until white Americans accept the racism of the past and admit to the privileges it's given them. Brutal but true. Yeah, I don't know that. I don't know. Well, I don't know that that there's this kind of mass idea of recognition of privilege that will actually move past that point. Because I think actually a bunch of people, you could begrudgingly get them to admit that privilege, and then that would just make them resentful from that point on, even though they admitted it. I don't trust that when people are say things in an obligatory sense, or to make you feel or anybody feel that they understand something when they really don't feel it in their hearts, that's a movement forward. Do I think they, that that voice is important? That idea is important? Absolutely. I'm just always reticent when anybody is in a situation where there's a rule about what they should say or admit to be part of a club or whatever, like to allow to be led into a conversation or trusted. It's just weird. It's it's as much non-whites being disadvantaged as much as Caucasians being privileged. I would say more so. Structural racism is probably worse and harder to undo than individual racism. I don't know how you don't link those together. And Amos, they expect us to comment on Al Sharpton or Jesse Jackson's latest remark, but ask about Trumpism, and they suddenly have something else to do. Right. It's as much, yeah. Get rid of the electoral college and then implement ranked choice voting. Yeah, I think I think that's an absolute, absolutely would help. Yeah. I think the state-by-state efforts to mandate that their electoral college votes will be based on percentage of popular vote is a good start. Rocky Mountain Mike, I actually think that is the game changer of all this stuff because, obviously, primarily the lawsuits that have been filed to fix gerrymandering in a lot of areas, which is, a very specific way that Republicans try to manage the vote of everyone in the country, being more inclusive. That they are literally trying to downplay the voters being more socially open, and that literally the racists are trying to curtail the people in this country who outnumber them, who aren't racist, from actually having their voice heard. Otherwise, the gerrymandering wouldn't be necessary. Election day should either be a weekend or a holiday. I think it should be a national holiday. I think that's absolutely the case. It should be a mandatory bank holiday. No question. I also think that you should be able to vote at any post office, in every region, at your local polling place, or any state office for no matter what, for the week before election day. And then polling places would get an updated, this person already voted. That you could check online, the day before or whatever, to make sure nobody's taking your vote away. But that if you went to a post office or a federal building or or a friggin' police station, and you voted at any of those places, that would show up on the list as, yeah, you already voted. We have postal votes if you will be away on election day, and polls are open 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Yeah, it's mail-in voting or being absentee is often one of the ways to handle a lot of this stuff. But that has to be going forward. But again, if people aren't voting, every one of these conversations are ultimately meaningless because for two reasons. One, you're not affecting your political voice in any material sense. And secondly, the people who are elected to office know they can't count on you. So that you're like, why don't they listen to their constituency? Because their constituency doesn't vote. And the ones, thank you, Robert. That's really awesome. Needs more cowbell. I need more cowbell. That's hilarious. California, vote for Dr. Maitran for Congress. Right on. I vote on paper, mail it in, as do I, actually. We have boxes where you can drop off and lots of other ways to vote, yeah. Anywhere you can get your passport application photos, you should be able to vote. Post office is a winner. I agree. I mean, we should be able to vote at any location where we get Soylent Green. Soylent Green is of Omaha is people you can chomp on when the going's rough. Mandatory voting should be mandatory. Yeah, I understand where you're going there. I do think the problem with mandatory voting is essentially that we are a country, we're a free country, so mandating behavior is antithetical to the very constitutional concept that we have. So forcing somebody to vote is that's difficult. I would say that you should have certain benefits limited if you don't vote. So if you don't vote, you don't get to use the DMV, for example. Like you don't get to use, you can't make an appointment for the DMV or any of the things that are shortcuts. So that you're not being forced to pay something secondarily on top of not voting. But if you don't vote, all the benefits of voting should, all the extra benefits of voting should be denied you, if that makes sense. And you can mandate you vote, but give the option of no contest. You don't have to choose one. Yeah, I mean, I think that's, yeah, no confidence. Yeah, I guess so. It baffles me that we don't have a holiday for voting. That's just stupid. I completely agree. Like, I mean, obviously, if we're talking about 4th of July, like as an Independence Day, if we're going to talk about having what makes our country special is a peaceful exchange of power because we get to vote on our leaders, then we have President's Day, we have all these things, but we don't have the actual day. I mean, that'll be my first act as president. Is we're going to declare, we're going to, by the executive order, we will make the day of voting day will be a national holiday. And we'll remove President's Day and move it to that day. So we'll no longer take President's Day off, but you'll celebrate President's Day by voting on, on your voting day. How about that? Celebrate the president, celebrate the, our independence, and our ability to, determine our own political work, but you're not going to have a day off to actually activate those thought forms. After the new Democratic majority comes in, we should be able to vote on Stormy Daniels Day. By the way, all these federal holidays, and most people complain about not getting Christmas or Thanksgiving off. Yeah, as president, go hell. Thank you. All the states change the election years for their governors' errors so they won't be affected by the presidential election. Oh, yeah, all the states change their election years for their governors so they won't be affected by the presidential election. Right. Yeah. Let's see. I'm reading through everybody. So, required instant runoff. Yeah. How all we need is Bill Pullman to yell into a microphone, "It's our voting day," right? I think it's just super important. And that's nice, Sandra, that you took a vacation day to work at the poll on Tuesday. That's exactly the kind of engagement I was talking about, where it goes beyond simply voting, and this is the same argument for, if you're talking about volunteerism, there's so many people like the right wing is all about it's not the place of the government to take care of starving kids. That's charities and churches. Like, do you do anything yourself? No. They don't engage in any of that charity work. They just think, well, somebody else will do it. And this is not, this is a common human behavior, I just think we have a responsibility to put put our money where our mouth is. Let the go where the rubber hits the road, whatever your analogy is, but to actually be engaged. Oh, have an enjoyable breakfast, Carl. That sounds lovely. More voting day. Voting in November is voter suppression in the northern tier. Trump's first runoff was in a Moscow hotel suite. Trump is a terrible result of the gradual shift of the center more rightward over the years. Mary Dixon will be a dangerous time if that happens. I think really the center of the country socially is actually moved left, which I think is indicative of the popular vote. And you could argue that some of that shift has been so drastically left that some of those people left the reservation and Bernie broed their way to not voting for Hillary. As they Jimmy Doored their vote, and said, well, America deserves it. If this is my choices, if it's Hillary or Donald Trump, then America deserves whatever's coming to it. Knowing full well, quite frankly, that a lot of them, being white and privileged, that they wouldn't be on the receiving end of these ICE raids. Yeah. In 2012, I tapped into an interview with a former Grand Dragon of KKK, and he boasted how he was grooming men with Germanic roots to infiltrate government and change it from the inside out. Well, Kurt, we talked about during the Iraq War when the government had a real problem with right-wingers and like neo-Nazis effectively trying to join the military and use the training there for the Great Day of the Rope, their big dream race riot, their race war that they was eventually going to come, and they started brooming those guys. Some of them they broomed outright. Some of them they tried to do on the down low, hoping nobody would notice that they took them in, and then ultimately those guys ended up joining police forces, and then we're wondering why they start behaving, in the way that they are. So, my question was that if Trump declares voter fraud, if he stays in office and loses next time, can he declare a police state military coup? I would doubt it. I think that a lot of the Republican, army training is part of their MO. That's true. I think a lot of the Republicans, even those who would consider themselves supporters of him, like that would be the sort of last straw for them, because a lot of them are, they're pigs, but they're, and they'll feed at the trough as long as it's sitting in front of them. But a lot of them, it's the difference between somebody who will, there are a lot of people who are comfortable sort of BSing or conning somebody out of money in a business deal that is unethical and illegal on some fronts. But there's a difference between that and armed robbery, and it's a line they won't cross, and I do believe that there's a bunch of those folks. I think there's some that would absolutely do it because they're religious maniacs who believe that, if Trump stays in office, he can declare himself God in the temple on the mount, and Jesus will come back and get rid of all those pesky Jews, that kind of stuff. Like the really crazy right-wing televangelist style, stuff. Like those guys, I'm sure they of course exist. They exist everywhere. So is there an echo in here? I'll continue to listen as I drive to Mandalay Bay to visit a friend from California. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, Summer's working all weekend at, so she's all caught up. So if you're listening, babe, hi. Yeah. So have fun, Natalie. Let's see. Scrolling back. You guys are so great. And here's the thing, and this, I run into this all the time, is, conceptually, and this, I'd love to hear from your guys' opinions about this, because I have, my if I have a single issue, um, it's fairness, uh, and honesty. You know, that these two things, I'm kind of always like, I get bristly when things are sort of overtly untrue. Oh, hi Ginger, look at you. How are you? Thank you so much. That I, when things are, blatantly dishonest and blatantly unfair, I bristle about that stuff, even when we're the ones doing it. Especially, I would think, actually, I get more upset about it when we do it from the left, because I feel like that's the part we can control. Like, I've never felt like you can control other people or what they're going to do. You can kind of try to motivate them, but you can't actually get them to do it, right? You can't actually, you can't count on other people to change, right? You can only change yourself, and and so when we're disingenuous or unfair or any of that stuff, like, I find myself bristling about it, and but sometimes I don't speak up about it necessarily as vociferously as I want, because there's this perception that if you question the methodology, you're questioning the cause itself, and that's a tough that's a tough one to deal with in sort of modern the modern politic, so yeah. Anyways, that kind of bounces around a lot in my head when I'm watching stuff on the news and how the stuff is drafted, because I also think that when people if you it's like the crying wolf concept, or if you call out, if you make all affronts equal, then it undermines the when you really have an issue. It really makes it hard to argue if you elevate small affronts to the level of high affronts. It doesn't make the small affronts bigger and more, people. It doesn't make people understand the impact of the small ones. It diminishes the big ones. So, if that makes any sense. So. Yeah, the prosperity doctrine. You're talking about that dude who's in, who is asking for his fourth Learjet or whatever, and then of course the Joel Osteen crowd. A lot of them are looking at the stock market and saying it works, Lord, it works. And as they have, as those folks get more spending money, there's a lot of people sending a little bit of money all the time to those folks. And I am I am who I am, and you guys are immensely helpful in keeping the show on the air and making it possible just through your super chats. I mean, that's where it goes. And can you imagine if I was promising everlasting life, and you guys were a little soft in the head? It's amazing how these guys can bilk people. Well, Amos, the guy said if Jesus came back, he wouldn't be riding a donkey; he'd have a jet. A, those guys really believe that, and B, that was the mistake Judas made, right? I'm not. Yeah, I kind of might be, Ginger. Now that I think about it, that Judas believed that when Jesus finally rose up and was king, he would have an army and material power upon the earth, and he would sit on a gold throne and the whole deal. And then when he didn't, he was like, I'll hedge my bets. I'll try and or not hedge my bets. I'll like kind of provoke this into happening, right? And so by doing that, sorry, I have something in my eye. It's really itchy. By doing this, by telling the Romans, that this is the guy and pointing him out, when they come to get him, he's going to have to rise up and show them his true power. And then when they came and got him, and instead of Peter lopped the guy's ear off and Jesus put it back on, was the story. And they took Jesus away anyways. That's why Judas hung himself, because he thought his plan didn't work out. He thought he was doing the right thing, right? But he believed that there would be this. Will we be able to fund a $50 more million jet for you, Hal? Jesse Duplantis might not need it much longer. I don't need the big 50 more. I'd rather just have the Cirrus SR-22. It's a prop plane, so it's much cheaper. I think it's maybe $700K. I don't need, in my prosperity doctrine, I don't need come on, guys. Very sweet. Hallelujah. That's right. Actually, that's the second coming when he's on the throne. Never promised that for the first coming. I know that, Billy, but the idea was that Judas believed Jesus. He was from a militant. It was like a Sicarii Jew, and believed that that he would have a kingdom on earth the first time, no matter what he said. And so the idea was that he was in. And again, I mean, you talk about the nature of that prophecy. If somebody doesn't turn him in and he doesn't get crucified, there is no prophecy and nothing happens. So Judas ends up becoming the most important person, right? This is, I don't know. Anyways, you can argue kind of the logistics of that. Is that I always thought it was funny when I was a kid and I was in church that they were so mad at Judas, and I was like, yeah, if there's no Judas, there's no prophecy, there's no crucifixion, there's no nothing. So somebody had to do it. So arguably, he's the more important one, right? So that's the key part. Funny how money tends to pervert one, isn't it? I don't know. It depends on what kind of perverted stuff you're using your money for, Ginger. Oh my goodness. But I think ultimately the idea was that the money that Judas took was a sham. That he took it to make the Romans feel like he was on their side, so they wouldn't just roll up and slaughter everybody. That this would be an exchange, and it would be I'll take your money, but I'll deliver him peacefully. You just have to promise to jail him and don't kill the rest of the guys, and da-da-da-da. Jesus wants you to be filthy rich because he's all about the bling. This is true, Amos, and I've always felt that, Little known secrets, Jesus did come back, but bloody Gina waterboarded him to death under orders from the CIA, right? How I've actually thought that about Judas too. Yeah. Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. Right. Well, that's the idea of like why offer anything in exchange for prayer. That's why when in theory that thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God is part and parcel to when you pray, don't offer behavior in its exchange. Simply be faithful. Otherwise, you're trying to bargain. You can't make God do anything. The argument is in prayer you could convince God of your sincerity of a desire, and desire literally means from the Father. Desire, those which you are sired from, right? So all desires are a prayer. Is that idea? You can buy Trump stuff at fire sale prices soon. This is true. At the end, those Jewish leaders had no king but Caesar, and Caesar ever showed them? And did Caesar ever show them who was boss? This is true. What would Jesus do? Jesus is all about the bling. Thou can't make the Lord do parlor tricks. I don't know. The fish and the walking on water and stuff. Like he was straight up Chris Angeling himself across. Christ Angel was putting on quite a show back then. You guys have some big icons. How did that? I think my emojis are very tiny. I don't know why that is. Why is that? It's all about faith. You imagine the smudging that will be necessary after his administration leaves. Oh my God, yeah, you have to walk through the whole White House with just like someone like literally covered in a sage Geely suit on fire running through the place. Ginger, getting ready to read your book, Dirty Little Secrets, while I'm off for the summer. Look at that, selling some books. Way to go, Ginger. I'd say enjoy, but not. That might be the book for that. How are you saying yours is smaller than ours? I have no. Yes, I'm saying that specifically, Billy. Even my Trumper dad won't wear Trump stuff. Yeah, I what was your DNA again? I'm more Scottish than anything else. I'm native, and then of course I'm 14% sub-Saharan African, which was really a curious find. And the weird thing is, there's that ad with that woman you've probably seen it. It's a really nice ad. It's kind of a tearjerker with the woman who's she's there's this female tribe leader, and she's like, I'm wondering where I got my strength from, yada yada, as if only the women in a family line only get their strength from the women in their family line, which is really wonky. Like, I don't understand. Like, what? But okay, what? I mean, you can inspire it anyways. So I suppose, you know, being inspired is one thing, but like, you don't genetically have a predisposition to strength because your grandmother was, or what? Like, oh, that, well, we may be related. That I would consider you a brother anyways, Carl. So there you go. But yeah, so. Anyways, it's a black lady. She's really beautiful. They show her wheel come up, and I'm like, she's like 50% English and Irish, and I'm more African than she is. What? I thought that was the weirdest part of that ad, because I'm like 14% and she's like 13%. I'm like, how is it that I have 1% more than this lady who's, and they're showing this, you know, like, tribe from back. It's like so funny. Okay, 25% Lebanese in the DNA test couldn't find in my sister. I won't do it. Oh, yeah. Some of them aren't fully, you know, actualized yet. I wouldn't doubt if you took it. If people took theirs again in like 10 years, it's very different because they're getting bigger and bigger sample sizes, and so I think it'll probably bifurcate even smaller over time. So like these big swaths where people have an entire chunks that this or whatever, like it'll get smaller and smaller as they go, oh, it's this tribe and this group, and you know, and I do have a lot less Cro-Magnon. I have less Cro-Magnon DNA than something like 60-70% of the populace, which is interesting. I have a lot less, and clearly I have there's no formative brow ridge, you know, that might indicate a more Neanderthal background, right? That's right. I'm 1.3% sub-Saharan African. Who knows where that came from? Oh, you know, it's an industry-wide problem. No Middle Eastern DNA to compare with. Yeah, I don't think they've. I think there's entire swaths they've left out too. So, very few people in Africa who spared $99 for DNA testing. So not lots of data from there. Although they do have a lot of African testing because of the amount of diseases that people have fought. Hey, it's Julie. Look at that. Hey, welcome, Julie. Look at that. Hi. We're just talking about our DNA. Became like a post show about that. And my Lebanese ancestors, Phoenicians, yeah, they went there. They went everywhere. Yes, this is true. I just watched this documentary about Neanderthals, and you know them basically being the Northern Europe Homo sapiens, you know, equivalent. And then the Homo sapiens moving up from Africa was the original theory, anyways, the out of Africa theory, which has kind of fallen apart in the last few years. But, I mean, there's still a large swath of human beings that came out of there, so they mated with Neanderthals and other groups. And there was the prevailing storyline was that the Neanderthals died as a result of the spread of Homo sapiens, and that the idea was that Homo sapiens effectively killed them all, and you know, and therefore they were the failed genetic species in a Darwin-esque kind of way. But if a good chunk of humans actually have Neanderthal DNA, and then I think it was just the mixing and the soft selection over time of more sapien-like traits, because it was quite a long period. 52% Ivory Coast. Nice. I've got a babysitter for this week for when I go to lodge for masonry. I needed one, and it's hard to find somebody that Camden likes. So there you go. Got hummus. What? Julie killers are failing of military members that collective as voters. We keep on electing presidents who misuse the military for necessary wars and conflicts. This is true. 50% Ivory Coast, Nigerian, Ghana, 48% Scandinavian, Great Britain, Germanic. Well, you're a mix, aren't you? And especially 41% Europe, South, 30% Great Britain, and 5% English and Wales. Yeah, I can see that with your Sicilian background. And I'm hoping to have some latent mutant DNA. I think that's in my mixed gunk because I had like 9% of like, I have no idea. Like there was this huge chunk of like, really, we don't know. You might be from space. The slave master did. Not sure why Great Britain and Ireland, Scotland, Wales are divided up. Well, because they're different people. Gamden Sparks for president. This is true. Dumpy has orangutan DNA. Need to get 23andMe kit at some point. Were you guys saying last time that like 23andMe or which one is it? Them or Ancestry is Mormon or something? Is a Mormon company? Not that that matters because they just it'll either be true or it isn't. But that could mean that they're like baptizing everybody's sample and making you everyone's Mormon by the time we're done. You know, because they were remember when they were posthumously baptizing dead people. It was Ancestry? Okay. I mean, Great Britain and the other countries are two separate categories. Yeah, well, if you look at, like, you know, Scottish redheads, you know, like fiery redheads and gingers, you know, there's a physical genetic difference, you know. That's what they're doing, Hal? Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. LDS is keeping track of everyone. I try to be on the cutting edge of it. Yeah. Oh, and thanks, Brad, for the jet. Oh, that's sweet. Yeah, so we need to. Well, first of all, you know, I've got to finish my flying lessons, so that you know, that'll be you know, that'll be over the summer. Hopefully, if the weather evens out. Mormons baptize mitochondrial even. Boom, everyone's Mormon, right? That's why the only reason that they are looking for like the fossilized body of a woman with no belly button. I might wake up dead with my own planet. That'd be cool. 1/3 Oompa Loompa. Sure. Well, that's pretty sweet. You get nothing. Good day, sir. As someone who's green-eyed redhead, I've come to terms that I'm a mutant. I've made peace with this. This is true. Working theory is mutant DNA is a virus. All right, sure. Why not? That'll be on my headstone. I'm not Mormon. They better spell it right. Because I'm not moron wouldn't really sell the point. They leave the second M out. Mitochondrial Eve was the Big Bang. All right, easy. Actually, Lilith was. This crazy ancestry shows Ireland, Scotland, Wales includes Nova Scotia. Well, the background of Sparks, Carl, and by the way, probably why I get a little uptight about abolitionists not getting their due is that the Sparks family was known as abolitionists, and even the Sparks family that was in, I want to say, Louisiana ages ago, were slave owners, became abolitionists, gave their slaves their freedom, and that's why a lot of black people have the name Sparks, because they took the name when they moved north to remind people that they were freed by this family in the South, right? So this is the it was Alabama then, I think. You're right. And so the abolitionists themselves, are playing as important a part in the story as the people who were fighting to keep, slavery there. I think it's super important to look at that movement and honor it. That being said, the Sparks family from that side, which is where we borrowed our name, was in came from Northern Europe and was Sparker, Sparkr, and was literally like literally a group of people known for their personality. Now, later on, though, the Sparks clan that I actually get my name from, and probably where it kind of derived from, was that my family tree, the lineage where my name comes from, was Sparrowhawk, because we were hawkers for the king, and the king and I guess somebody in my long family line saved the king's life 3 times. And so if you look at the Sparks seal from Scotland and England, it starts with a little shield with a boreal kind of like trees and squares, right? And then eventually it had a lion on top of it, and then the lion, after a few years, his first paw is up, then his second paw comes up, and then he's breathing fire, and he's on top of a shield, or I mean not a shield, a knight's helmet. And the reason is because he saved the king's life 3 times. And so at each time they kind of added a little affectation of how tough this dude was. But he was a hawker, and he used sparrowhawks. And the king of that symbol is actually a Jesus Christ symbol that's famous, but it looks like HS. So I printed it out because I was like, that's really interesting. It's literally a Christian symbol for an Old English way of saying Christ's name, but it looks like a carving of HS. So anyways, I printed it out because it interested me. So but the king liked the hawks. I gotta see if I've got a copy of the thing itself. And my family's logo name is whatever the motto of the family is. Yeah, it's the HIS papal seal. That's right. In hoc sanctum. There you go. Is Celere Veris, which is swift and true. So the swift and true, because the king thought the sparrowhawks were the swift and true. They were the best hawks for hunting. And so the Sparrowhawk clan eventually became the Sparks group over time. Sparks, Sparrowhawk, Sparks, like it broke down like that, as language does over time. So there you go. How about the star in your signature? That's just straight up witchcraft. I could have saved a lot of money. Always remember that Mitt Romney has a lot of Catholic ancestors in his woodpile. Right. Lilith was the independent chick that Adam complained to God about. That's right, Robin. That's why it's where Lilith Fair gets its name. Yeah, Sparrowhawk becomes Sparks. That's right. The way ancestry delineates Great Britain includes Brittany, Normandy, and the Netherlands. That's right. And Sparker, which is spelled like this, is the Netherlands Norwegian kind of way of doing it. Oh, I got my patch, Hal. Not sure how to stitch rubber, but whatever. There's a groove in it, and just take it to a dry cleaners that does any kind of stitching or whatever, and just have them sew right in the groove in between the symbol and the outer frame. That's what it's for. Yeah. Not so Sparks, not like the stars. Yeah, well, it is because of me now, you know. So yeah, I love I love money, the evangelical symbol for Jesus. That's right. Hey, man, he was all about abundance, right? Turned to a fish and a couple loaves of bread into enough for everybody. Thought it was the Michael Schenker Group logo. It is very close to that, I will say. I wouldn't doubt that that's partly where they got it from. Sparkle, right. Bad Amos, bad. How's Mr. Sparkler? Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, so that's sort of the root of it. I want to say I printed it. No, did I print it and put it up there? Is it up behind me? No. Mason stuff. Yeah, I took it down. I think it's in the other room. But yeah, so that's the trick. There you go. Water into gold. I'm scared to do ancestry.com. I swear I'm not. Looks left, looks right. I'm really not paranoid. Hey, you know what's funny? I have to say, like, being I'm going on my I'm in my 18th year of being famous, of being publicly an awarity, of being known as I go out and about, being aware of my existence in terms of other people spot me, right? Which up until 2000, essentially 1999, in my life I was not. I mean, I was known for some stuff, and I would be famous in certain circles, or people would come see a show and they would know me from that right afterwards. But there's a big difference from that, like, people you have not seen live at a show or whatever, knowing you from television and other stuff like that. And it's an extraordinary thing. It's a curious experience, no doubt. Yeah, that's right, from Talk Soup, in the initial kind of break from that. And so doing things like, getting fingerprinted for my TSA number and, my TSA pre or global entry, or, doing a DNA thing or whatever, because I don't really have the option of anonymity anymore. Not that I'm really looking for it, because I like people, so whatever. It's totally cool. Maybe male celebrities are in a bit less danger from obsessed fans than male famous people. You mean female? No, not per se. And it was the woman, the person who broke into Sharon Gless's house with a gun was a woman. I don't know. Yeah, not necessarily. I mean, everybody has their stuff to watch out for. You can't know, what. But anyways, I have this. I've had some run-ins that were pretty heavy duty. So it's something you have to be aware of or whatever. But either way, I realize that I don't have the option of anonymity the way people do, and I never will again. Not really. Well done, J. Totine. There you go. I even worry about her being just Mary in Ann Arbor on Steph's show. Who would Jesus deport? Yeah. It depends. I mean, is it one of those give unto Caesar what is Caesar's idea? Hard to say. It depends on their interpretation of it. And I bet there's somebody out there who's willing to interpret it exactly that way. Trying to look like I look on my FB Mary in Ann Arbor page. Right. Jesus just inspired everyone to share the food that they brought. Mm-hmm. I think that's a good argument, W. Absolutely. Although I have seen what I would consider miraculous things and experienced miraculous things in my life that are just impossible. And if you want to argue, mass complexity argument that everything's mathematical and therefore everything's potential, so therefore nothing's miraculous or whatever, like, I don't buy it. Do I have a lot of obsessive fans? I have some, yeah, I can say that. You might, Hal, but that would mean that your career ended and you returned to obscurity. Hope that never happens. Yeah, I don't think that'll happen. And interestingly enough, Tom, the stuff I have done, even in my short time of being known, has been very specifically effective. You know, I don't know why I'm wearing these anymore because I'm not taking calls. I'm wearing my earrings right now, by the way. I don't know if you saw that. I feel like if you know, even if I decided to sort of quasi-retire, the kind of stuff I do would thankfully draw a you know, still draw attention from people that I feel like my career has helped or elevated or entertained in a very specific way than if I was just kind of on a random sitcom. Oh yeah, Nicola, these are just the people who are you guys are just, that's just the number of the people who are in the chat. That doesn't count the people who are you know, who just watch or watch later, right? And I see you. So, okay. Shire, you won't. You need to be busy. No, I obviously won't. So I have no intention of it. And you know, many of you know that my goal is to be the old guy in the movie. You know, my goal. In all fairness, I don't see the craziness I used to. Hal's learned some hard lessons. Yeah, you can say that. Yeah. I kind of miss the craziness. I won't lie, but I'm also, as a, you know, as a father and as somebody in a relationship and as somebody who, you know, also is, you know, in the case of some of my co-stars, you know, I've had to recognize that, like, I'm like running interference for them too. Can't wait for you to have gray hair. I have some. It's just not enough to, you know, be meaningful yet. It'll be cool. Love your vocal cords. Well, thank you. Oh, are you saying that to Mary? All right. Can't be crazy once you become a parent. People do it all the time. I just choose not to. I'm going to keep your bell here. Thank you. It's technically dark brown. It just looks black because of my contrast of my cameras is all weird. It's the same thing that makes my skin look kind of orange. Or not. It's like kind of reddish pink. But whatever. No, Julie, no gray hair forever. You can, but likely you won't be a good parent. This is true. Hal, the future George Burns. Yeah, I kind of see myself as a future Burgess Meredith. You know what I mean? Like, that's my goal. You look good as a blonde in that tweet. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Gotta go. Hal, going to a concert tonight that includes some metal. Very nice. Have fun, Seattle Suzuki. That's what I say about my hair. Right. Our time here with Hal is the best part of the... Oh, thanks, Mary. That's awesome. I think Bob Barker quit dyeing his hair because of animal byproducts. This is true, but I don't know what kind of mink blood he was using to do his hair. But, you know, obviously times have changed. Yeah. Not like, I'll be daddy cool, right? What, Seattle Suzuki, what metal are you gonna show? What, how does it include some metal? Your goal is to look like the Penguin? Yeah, that's right. No, my goal is to look like Rocky's trainer when I'm old. Speaking of metal, check out Frog Leap's metal version of Toto's Africa on the Frog Leap YouTube channel. I've seen that. It's cool. Can always find more vegan-friendly hair dye. Yes, this is true. Hal brings the cool to whatever he does. Comedian, magician, dad. It's all there. This is true. I try. Do you like Dwight Oakham and Steve Earle? Not really. I mean, I like Dwight as an actor. But, yeah. I just, like, I can't do modern country. Even the more, like, and I considered him solid. But just not what I do. It's just not my thing. I mean, you know, if I listen to anything country-ish, it's straight up bluegrass. How's school's dad on the lock? I try. I really do. It's, you know, I have to say, it's, you know, after what I've been through kind of, you know, with my kind of arrangement with having my son and not being in a relationship with his mom and all that kind of stuff, and what it entails going through, and knowing that to some degree, as tough as my experience was, and it was tough, I was in the protected class, even because I'm known, because I'm famous, and so I think if I'd have really decided to raise hell about the circumstance of just trying to deal with the system as it is, it would have had impact, and so I think I was treated with and I have to say, like, not to get too much into it because I don't want to badmouth anybody in the process, but the judges I had were very respectful people. They had their own prejudices and their own preconceived notions, and ultimately you could see them kind of pushing back against them when they're in that process. But I definitely have like when dads aren't getting their due in society and in how we talk about them, that definitely gets my gander up. So it's one of those things like, call your dad, tell him you love him. Your dad tried hard too. I mean, and again, it just kind of goes to that whole idea of, there's a certain number of monsters that have allowed, that have erased the valiant and important fatherhood that exists. Wow, you guys got quiet all of a sudden. Must have touched a nerve. But I don't think that gets said enough. Burgess Marathon. Well, let me hear you say, Rock, you gotta eat lightning. You're gonna crep thunder. That's him spitting out orange seeds. My dad's dead. Well, I obviously then pay respect to an uncle or a dad, that you have in your family who's there. Yeah, Father's Day's around the corner. We'll do maybe Cam and I'll hop on and do a little live stream Father's Day moment. The impact of a dad is critical. I lost mine when I was 11. I can't even begin to express how my life changed because of this. Yeah. Like I love my dad, and my dad has, he's getting some age-related health problems that are very concerning. And I know it wears on him, and having a grandson has really, invigorated him, and seeing him take Camden, fishing or, out for a walk together to look at some deer or whatever is just, it's a glorious thing. It is just beautiful. I will fight for kids to have access to their dads if that dad gives a damn and wants to actually father their kid. Absolutely. I know that to be a fact, Gender, and I love you for it, so thank you. Oh, that's awesome, Professor Frank. Lost my dad in 85. I'm sorry to hear that, Amos. And women who play fast and loose with dads because the courts favor them hurt their kids more than they know. This is true. You can't, like... I do feel like, from the rhetoric I hear, we kind of... we just don't give dads, attention. They've very much taken for granted in that regard. It's the one thing I hate: parents playing divorce tennis with their kids. Yeah. I'm sorry to hear that, Robin. Yeah, and my girlfriend Summer lost her father. He died really young, and I know how that not having that there is, and Julie lost her father last year. Or is it? Gosh, has it been 1 year, 2 years already? Almost 1 year? Yeah. I lose track of the time because I have no concept in this weird Trump world. It's just been a year, right, Julie? It's it's just meaningful. Like, and there's this weird almost zero-sum attitude we have, that if you care about, you know, thank you, Julie. I'm sorry, I'm like brain frying on that because I look back at the time, because it seems like so much time has passed in the last year. Um, yeah, sorry to hear that, Carl. That, you know, there seems to be this idea that if you value your mom, you don't value your dad. Like, if you value your dad, you don't value your mom, or something like that. Like, your parents somehow are, like, not loving both of your parents is like at the expense of the other. And this is probably part of our divorce mentality. You know, that there's been some sort of hedging of one against the other, and kind of how we look at things, this kind of Kramer versus Kramer concept, you know. And thank you, Julie. Yeah, sorry to hear that, Kurt. So, you know, I think, you know, how they express, you know, we've kind of grown up with this idea that you got to pick one, and you don't. You know, both of them have a value in your life that's different, and both of the lessons are different, and both the experiences are different, and I think they're intrinsically different. And you're right, Ginger. People feel like they have to take a side. Or a horse rescue place where I once volunteered, put down animals, and roadkill are rendered for putting that here. Huh? That's not surprising at all. Robin, he was in good shape other than the heart, and was able to have less invasive surgery and had a good surgeon. That's good to know. Man, Kevin Smith's story about his heart attack is just brutal. Whew. What do you guys think of me toying with real estate this month? I don't know. Go for it. Don't toy with it. Make it a job. Do it. You know. But anyways, so like before I get too teary-eyed about it, like, you know, this is, you know, I that's the one thing I think I've gotten a view of in the last few years that I couldn't have been aware of beforehand. You know. Yeah, you don't have to be a fan of Kevin Smith to not want a guy who basically just makes his living making silly movies and talking about comic books to not have a massive heart attack. I don't have the best relationship with my father, but when we play together, I forget everything. Play violin, he's so controlled. That's interesting. You play violin. So, you know, my father died when she was 13. Sadly, he smoked himself to death. My dad smoked when I was a kid, and I started charging him a quarter for every cigarette I saw him smoke. By the time I graduated high school, he owed me $7,000. Never paid me, though. EO, are you buying 666 Fifth Ave? Yeah. EO, you have to be the 666 Fifth Avenue real estate agent for us. That's great. To be fair, I'm not real wild with him either, but I do share his worship of Batman. I believe that as women, our fathers have a big impact on who we become, and that's it. And as I said that to someone who didn't have a father, and she felt so offended, I was like, she was half-baked as a result. Did he pay it? Yeah, no, he didn't pay it. Kevin Smith loves dogs, so he can't be all bad. Isn't that what they said about Hitler? I don't know if that's the best one. Chesterfields and Pall Malls. Jesus Christ. He should have sent you to college with that $7 grand. Yeah, my dad, it's always been kind of a running thing with me and my dad, is that, you know, because I wanted to study the arts, that wasn't a valuable aspect, you know, expenditure of money for college. Happy Sunday, just getting here. Sorry, late. Got the patch. Very cool. Oh, nice, Jamie. That's great. It's like your dad's impact takes nothing from your mother. His presence or absence is significant. This is true. My favorite memories of my dad was going to ball games and fishing. Yeah. Hitler killed his dog Blondie with cyanide, lest we forget. This is true. He was only his dogs. He loved his dogs as a valuable additive to himself. How first commission check I get out of real estate, I'll make a super chat for it. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, just you know, just the first $1. That's it, right? You it's the $1. I agree that architecture is part of the arts as well. Hey, Julie. You didn't forget. It's just good to have you here, but thank you so much. That's really awesome. Yeah, you guys are great. It's funny because during the in between shooting in China and the next one, like basically like super chat and all that stuff is the only money I have coming in because I'm not working because I'm just got Camden this whole time. So I'm doing like one, maybe 2 shows, but they're all just minor, more appearances, working on material than doing any shows. So every little bit helps. Thank you guys. It's awesome. Depends on who the guest is seeing you. Really, it's my opinion. If this guest is more lefty, you might like those episodes. Rogan alternates between acceptable and not. Yeah, we all do. You know, I disagree with him on a bunch of stuff. You know, and that's, you know, it's an interesting thing. Because obviously, oh, thank you, Julie. Like Jordan Peterson's made a lot of noise lately, and obviously he's getting a lot of attention. And I don't disagree with him on some base points. I just think he's a dick is his problem. Like that's his problem. He's a bad shepherd of some good ideas, and there's a lot of that going around. There's a lot of people who have reasonable points worth making, but they can't check their own emotions or their own attitudes enough to not be a dick. And that comes up more so with Rogan's guests than he is, because I think he's a genuinely nice guy. As a matter of fact, I think Rogan, more than almost anybody that he has on, is a total cream puff. He's a sweetheart. And he's very emotionally easy to affect. Because he's a classic bluster bomb. He's like, you know, he's bulky and built like a bulldog. Just, you know, super muscular, but I think it belies a sensitivity underneath that's, you know, easily affected. And if you watch how he talks about most stuff, baked moments aside, I think he's he's got a very childlike nature. Thank you, Jamie. That's awesome. Does everyone want to be Howard Stern? No, I don't think so. Jordan PC is one of the conned. I don't know what that means. Too bad he's not good UFC commentator. He's too biased. I don't know. He makes his living doing it, and commentators are just that way. You can agree with them or don't agree with them, and so that's why they have multiple people on the panel. You know. And anybody who gets too much into it is too biased. And besides, you're a big wrestling fan, so I don't know how I can take you seriously about Ultimate Fighting. They're absolutely at odds with each other. I want to be Rush Limbaugh, but for good and not evil. We'll absolutely do it, Ellie. We support you 100%. Yeah. I want to ask you, Hal, do I annoy you on Twitter? I tweet you so much and fangirl so hard. No, you do not. It's totally fine. Peterson is a conservative authoritarian. Those people are the Trump base. I disagree. I don't think he's an authoritarian. I would argue that he's not even conservative in those moments. I think he has his own personal prejudices that upset him, but I don't know. And he's certainly closer to a true religious conservative or an old school conservative. Listen to Howard up until 2000, but not since Sirius. You know, it's funny because I always thought that was odd when he moved, and then it became a big winning move for him. Ellie Warner, you want to be a young Turk? No, you don't. There's a huge difference between a wrestling fan and MMA fan, Hal. I know. That's my point. My dad was an architect, Edgar White, FAIA, focused on saving, landmarking, and restoring. All best buds of Jack Kerouac, and even on the road is Tim Gray. We need more folks who want a landmark. I agree, Jamie. My dad, was a specialist in period architecture and helped rebuild the original Kentucky State Library, which is a wood building, by the way. I know because I helped make square nails with them because they were, you have to hand make them and hand press them, and so I did that as a project with my dad one summer. Made piles of square nails, he was actually hired on to one of his projects was the Bloomingdale's building in Chicago because it was a period building. So pro wrestling is fake, and I'm not in 8th grade anymore. Okay. Tree nails, right? Trunnels. Joe Rogan is very differential to his guests, so if you're right guest, he'll shift him right. If he has more left guests, he'll shift that way. I think he does that to further the conversation. You know what I mean? Because if your only job is, and this is the problem that I have oftentimes when Peterson is interviewed, is that the interviewer seems less about interviewing Peterson as defining his interview before it happens, and that's why they always get into trouble and they kind of look stupid. And again, one of the worst things you can do if you have a genuine principle is give up that principle in going after your enemies, because then they can argue that you are not a person of principle. How your dad would have gotten along with mine, who passed away a year ago. Same big heart. I don't doubt it, Jamie. I completely agree. I learned WWF was just theater at a young age. Yeah. I worked for, and oh wow, Frank Lloyd Wright Home in Wisconsin, architecture preservation. So that's great. I don't know Jordan Peterson. He's a Canadian professor who got known because he pushed back against the Canadian law of enforcing gender pronouns, like non-gender or gender neutral or gender specific pronouns being more inclusive. So his argument was that it was compelled speech, that this was the first time that the Canadian government had said you must use these regardless of your belief system. I have my own problem with that rule, and that is that I think enforced respect is a lie, and when you force people to live a lie, you actually create more resentment in the first place, and that's ultimately what that law did in a lot of fronts. And so instead of, and again, there's a difference between morality and a law, and if you try to enforce a morality based law, a lot of times all you do is create hypocrites. And when that happens, you create a lot of pushback. Now, if it's in a material sense, like letting black people go to certain colleges or whatever, I don't care how people feel about that. But when you're talking about language, there is a certain point where the government should take no action to enforce language on people, period, unless it like yelling fire in a crowded theater. Everything else should be above board. The ramifications for that should be social, not legal. Because once you get into creating a legal precedent where the government can compel speech, then you permanently create that legal precedent, and therefore in the future the government can compel any kind of speech because of the legal precedent. So I don't believe in giving any ground, and I think that was his main push. I just think, like I said, he's kind of a dick. And so in being a dick, his pushback made him seem more bigoted than his point, and then attributed bigotry to that point instead of the other way around. So you can enforce civility on a professional level. Enforcing it on an interpersonal level is more problematic. Exclusive violent behavior, of course. Exactly. That's right. And again, if your goal is respect, if your goal is people to respect other human beings, you can't legally force that respect. You can enforce the material aspects, like I said, being able to use businesses, being able to go to schools, not excluding Jews from organizations and the like. And then I would say that the Canadian law about compelled speech, where you're saying, yes, we can make you use these certain words, is sort of, on a free speech level, the equivalent of allowing people to deny gay people, wedding cakes to some degree. If you give ground in that, you also go, well, for religious reasons, I don't believe Jews should be allowed on my golf course. Like that, it's a real easy legal jump from one to there. So you don't give that ground. You don't go, in the name of religious freedom, we let people deny people business on their, because they don't want to work based on their religious freedom. Well, now, where does that stop, right? And so the same thing applies in the inverse from a liberal's, standpoint. On the linguistic side, you do not compel speech ever. Jordan Peterson puts a scholarly face on the anti-social justice backlash. I think they use him as cover. I think he actually genuinely believes what he's saying. I don't think it's a face. And I think and again, my problem with social justice warrior is, not to get too Carlin about it, but is the breakdowns of that point. First of all, there's no such thing as social justice. There's legal justice, and then there's social interaction. Whenever you try to create social justice, what you do is you water down what legitimate justice is. And then social justice warrior I mean, if you're trying to create an egalitarian, peaceful society where everybody's allowed to be who they are, and then you use warrior as your phrase, it's just, you're just taking on the moniker of the enemy and using it and saying it has value, and so then you can't be surprised when violence comes from that. This is a guy who was saying if we had sex with men, they wouldn't be violent. What? That isn't the same guy who was saying if we had sex with men, they wouldn't be violent, is it? I don't think that's what he was saying, but I don't know the direct quote you're talking about. I'm just talking about where he got his start, whatever. But the point, and I'm talking about how he's interviewed. What he's saying, I'll leave that up to everybody's interpretation as to whether they think it has value or not. And if you want to know about it, go look. If you don't care, that's not the important thing. The important thing is how you address a person you have a political difference with or a philosophical difference with. And you have to be very careful in doing that you don't give them more ground than they deserve simply by overstepping your own point. And so he's rude, seeing you. He's just a rude guy who can appear to be more polite and civilized. He's Canadian. They are more polite and civilized. There's a flip side of being an identity politics fanatic, Hal, but there are very few of those people like Peterson who take the one outlier and say it's all liberals. Yeah, I don't think he does that. I think he actually makes the case that that left wing goes too far, and it's up to the left to police when people have gone too far with that thing. In the lecture that I saw, it was a debate actually. That's what he was talking about. Yeah, and I'm not a big fan of quote unquote identity politics either in that regard. I'm a big believer in humanity politics. But that's what makes me a radical centrist, and that's why people get irritated with me, because they consider me a fake lefty or whatever, like I've been called or whatever. I'd rather be labeled a hippie than an SJW. All right, yeah, that's reasonable. Hippie's pretty good. All people named Jordan are a problem. Yeah, Jordan Peterson exaggerates very greatly the number of people on the left who go too far. I agree. I don't think the number is as big as he is. But again, he's a college professor, so he sees the college campus version, and that's probably why he reacts that way. It's like everybody thinks that their backyard is indicative of the rest of the world. If you have crabgrass, the world must be overrun with crabgrass. And again, that's why I believe in sort of universal travel. There's nothing fake about you, Hal. Well, thank you, Amos. I would argue that I curtail my beliefs and try to communicate them better, and so that definitely is me not speaking from my id, but that's the real me. The real me wouldn't go, I had an idea, so I will just say it as it first occurred to me, and I see that happening a lot, and because people feel they are right or whatever. I mean, it's just, it's important to me to kind of measure it. And that's what got Obama in trouble with a lot of people, is they always felt like he was equivocating. I'm like, he's not. He's trying to be careful, and careful means, literally full of care, actually caring about what the ramifications are of what you're saying and what you're doing. The big righty memes against general equality is virtue signaling and social justice warriors. I agree, but I also think that those things are handed to them sometimes by people who don't understand that they need to manage their message, because it is important. And I think ultimately that's where Obama had that moment where he's like, did we go too far or whatever. I think he's definitely considering that, and he's not necessarily wrong, because sometimes your idea is terrific. How you communicate it or how you present it might be terrible, and so you have to question. And I think it's always good to go, is my message getting my point across, or is my message eating my point? Is my principle being served by my messaging? Those kind of things. Like, that's always a good idea to if you want to be effective, anyways. If you want to actually benefit the world, right? And to me, that's important. So I will measure what I do, and it's also it affects how I, what I say in my stand-up as well. Obviously, my stand-up, I have a very specific set of rules about what I joke about. Um, I don't, like, for example, I don't joke about anything anybody can't change. And that's my primary rule. My idea about what people can change about themselves might be different than someone else's, but that's a principled stand that I take, and I'm willing to determine based on that, what the realm of jokes that I will make is, right? And I think it's, as long as you're operating, like, the constant running theme is that I've been able to joke about in my act all the things that supposedly get you kicked off of college campuses and you can't talk about in front of very liberal audiences who supposedly get upset about these things and are all snowflakey about them. And that hasn't been the case, because I think the principle of what I am saying is clear in what I'm talking about. And I think some people, I call them, like, bad shepherds of good ideas. People have, there can be people on the left and the right who have good ideas about what they want to do, but they're just terrible shepherds of them. They're the worst person to present those ideas, because they can't manage their emotions, they can't articulate themselves well, they don't manage their knowledge of facts. And so when they're confronted in a debate or in a circumstance, they fall apart in the face of it, or they're too deferential, or as Peterson would call it, they're high on the agreeableness scale, so they're too agreeable, therefore they won't, they vacillate between not fighting for their point to over fighting, and there's a lot of that. I think the left in general, our problem has been, that we are too deferential up to the point of crisis, and then there's a panicked flailing. The fight back is a mess. It's unmanaged. And that's a shame. And it's what happens when you go into a battle without a strategy. And I think there's a value in sitting with yourself in the face of, and this is why, by the way, I don't ever get tired of going after Trump. I don't go, oh, God, it's getting me down. Or I don't actually, Ginger, that's absurd. So I don't know where that comes from, but that's a ridiculous notion. But again, if you're fighting against somebody like that, and it doesn't have to be him. I used him as an example, but it could be Ben Shapiro. It could be, Steven Crowder, who does that, there's gay marriage is wrong, it changed my mind. He does those kind of weird provocative BS sit-downs in front of organizations to try to provoke people. And it works, because what he does is he comes in with his kind of standardized attitude, and his whole point is he won't break emotionally. He'll just let you freak out, and he'll just keep poking with what he considers provocative things, not based on anything, and he'll use, like, decontextualized statistics to prove a point that isn't even played out. But he'll put that in there and just kind of sit there calmly and basically find somebody he can drive nuts, and then put that on his YouTube channel, and anybody who's kind of managed about it won't get the same attention. Same thing is true of, Dave Rubin's kind of just a right-wing farm. He just farms right-wingers. He doesn't really have anybody left-wing on his show to discuss these things. He plays the liberal, and and effectively, like, he has all these guys like, hey, I'm just having a conversation, which you're not. You're handing a bullhorn is what you're doing, without any real, discussion or pushback. And again, I don't think necessarily that an interviewer's job in almost any context is to push back against what the person is saying right out of the gate. And some of the most successful interviewers are people who kind of lay back and draw people out. And you can look at that as sort of the Lester Holt argument. Is that Lester Holt doesn't have a political bent on his interview. He'll do a little bit of what's kind of standardized pushing, but most of it's pretty like jovial. And if you look at it from a right wing or a left wing side, interviewing somebody like that, you should slam these people to the mat the second they walk out there. Who are you, you baby killing bastard? And there's absolutely a principled reason for doing that. But will you end up getting anything from them other than being able to high five yourself, right? And your goal has to be more than just being able to high five with your people who already agree with you afterwards. If you can draw somebody out and make them admit they're wrong about something, or crisscross their change their attitude about something, which is people have seen me do with people who have called in, like right wingers who've called in on the show before. It takes a much more measured approach, right, to do that than to just go, this guy comes on here, I'm going to tell him what a pig he is, and you're like, well, fine, and then it'll shut down, and you'll pat yourself on the back, and then it'll be over. And that debate model is how the topic of race and IQ, which gets brought up about every 10, 15 years, gets you. Glad to see you back, by the way, Hal. Thank you, Blake Light Blues. Yeah, I mean, the race and IQ debate is just, it's junk science. It's just garbage. Period. And again, all of these things are things I'm willing to debate with anybody. But there's, I just have this little radio show on, on the weekends on this little station with our little group in here, and and so I don't have like the full-time YouTube. I've got a career, so I don't have the full-time career YouTuber thing to get caught up in that kind of nonsense, But again, it's this is one of these things where like I feel like I could debate anybody on almost anything. Skill-wise, I just only choose to do it on stuff that I'm principled about. You really want to interview to say as much as they can so the truth can come out. The worst thing to do is ask yes or no questions. Yeah, well, you want to draw them out. I mean, you're fishing ultimately, right? I think that's why Karl Rove people have avoided you. Yeah, they're definitely not paying me. Did I debate at New Trier? Only with the dean of students about whether or not I should be expelled. No, I wasn't on the debate team. That was such a rich kid thing. Like, coming from Kentucky and moving to Chicago and going to that school, it was very odd to, like, that they had a lacrosse team and a debate group and all that kind of stuff. And, like, the idea that you would have joined the debate team. Like, basically, I mean, arguably, that's what my stand-up is. It's just a one-sided debate. I just don't give a shit about the other side because I've thought about it already, so I don't need somebody up there to say it to me. Glad to do it. But that being said, I've read books on debate. I've read books on language and manipulation. I've read books that I specifically disagree with. I had a girlfriend who was a huge Ayn Rand fan, so I read The Fountainhead. I read Atlas Shrugged. I read... was it The Virtue of Selfishness? Is that what it is? And I understood the appeal of parts of it, and then I understand the poison of the rest of it. And I also looked at a lot of it written in the context of somebody who was alive and escaped communism and went to the United States and was hostile to it and wrote this kind of, middle finger over back shoulder about it. And then of course read it in the context that she was on Social Security when she died and would have died in poverty without it, and her boyfriend, she either pretended he was her husband or a relative or something to get him on Social Security too. So, yeah, is a rhetorical stand-up is a rhetorical act. I started in the debate team, but it was too much conflict for me. I disagree. I don't believe you. Please, a citation needed. Yeah, so it's important. Rand offered a great way for people to legitimize their selfishness. Yeah, this is true. I mean, Carl, I would argue that there are some people who are deferential to a fault, that they have been raised in such a way that they sideline and their own needs and create secondary needs so much so that they need an overcorrection to do it. And so sometimes reading something like Ayn Rand can kind of jumpstart their own sense of self-worth. And I see that happening a lot. And I think that's what, you know, early college readers of Ayn Rand who read it and they kind of have their eyes opened to it find. And then eventually the more egregious, grotesque parts of it wear off. Some people don't. They obviously, you know, connect to it. But, you know, in terms of, you know, the value of owning your own space, being you know, being self-reliant, you know, owning, you know, there's a book my cousin recommended to me. It was written by a Marine, and it's got a very Marine kind of a name to it. Where is it? Is it in? Oh, I didn't download it on this one. Let's see, all books. There we go. I'll find it in here. Where are you? Don't hide my iCloud books. It's called Radical. Where is it? Oh, Extreme Ownership. Yeah. So Extreme Ownership is written by a Navy SEAL, and the whole thing is about everything that's wrong with your life is your fault, always. It's this Navy SEAL attitude about take 100% responsibility for yourself all the time, no matter what. It is your fault, and that's a lot to take on. But it's it's a decent message, because with it, it has to come the ability to change it, right, and to do something about it. If you believe that, but then you believe there's nothing you can do about it, that's just a recipe for paralysis, right? And so there's something really valuable about owning, of ownership of your life, right? And I think that's like, it can be important, right? And Ayn Rand is some people's way through that. I mean, if you listen to literally like some of the early Rush albums were inspired by Ayn Rand, was the beginning of Neil Peart reading Ayn Rand and writing it into lyrics and all kinds of stuff, Let's see. I remember a former coworker who was a Democrat but liked Ayn Rand. I didn't understand. Maybe it was about self-esteem, confidence in the male-dominated profession. Well, I think here's, this is one of the big issues, I think, with Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck has the same message, I think. A little bit, although I think it's like not, if it's not caring what other people think is very healthy. Not caring about the ramifications of what you're doing is actually terrible. And it's a recipe for disaster. That being said, I think there's a lot of people who take what is a personal system for emotional and psychological management and they turn it into a political thing. I think Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules or whatever, what's his book called? I have to look it up. 12 Steps or whatever for life, is more akin to a regular self-help book, right? And I've, you guys know me. I've read all of Tony Robbins' stuff. I love, in the Robbins world, Mel Robbins' book, the 5-second rule. I mean, I can literally scroll through, my, books in here. Like Og Mandino's University of Success is a book I highly recommend. And you're not, you can read it once and then read it the second time and you're a different human being, right? And Ginger, I think you're right. That is a tightrope. It is a tough one because once you take on that, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of weight, to say that I'm 100% responsible for how I ended up. And not a lot of people are comfortable with that idea. And I think there's an appeal to that way of thinking in what Ayn Rand is talking about. The problem is when you try to attribute it to governmental stuff, and her stuff is absolutely meant to be governmental as opposed to personal. if her books were all about, like, essentially a sort of give unto Caesar's attitude towards, look, I live in this country, this is free will, I've got taxes I have to pay, and I've got this circumstance, we have social programs to make sure people don't fall through the cracks, because that's part of what makes the country great. But as it goes for me, I will never take a dime from the government, and here's why, and da-da-da. There's an argument you can make for that, or whatever, especially if you're not a hypocrite and you actually live up to it, right? The problem is when they try, that's what libertarians are. Libertarians are effectively people who are trying to take sort of a Tony Robbins approach and externalize it, make it less about themselves and how the government should work, right? And instead of being 100% self-reliant, they're going, you should be 100% self-reliant. Whatever is, I don't know what's happened. I don't care what's happened to you. So there you go. We live in a culture where successful people are self-made, but if they fail, it's someone else's fault. Yeah, I would argue that that's an agreed to thought. My sister was a fan of Rand. She's a right-winger and a lesbian. There's a lot of women who are fans of Ayn Rand. Sam Harris, careful intellectual who sometimes sounds lefty, gives a nod to bell curve. Rachel, like it. Sam Harris is a fool. I'm not a fan of Sam Harris. And again, like, when I was saying there are people who are bad shepherds of good ideas, he's got a lot of bad ideas too. And I think, I've said this, like, discussing philosophy or religion or any of that stuff with Sam Harris is like discussing fellatio with a praying mantis. Like, that he's a tin man in the worst sense, so I don't expect any kind of, again, don't go to a dry well looking for a drink of water, and that's what Sam Harris is, in my opinion. But again, you can read and absorb anything, right? And kind of find good in all kinds of stuff. But anyway, so that was that's my rant on that part of it. Immigrants took their job, the government takes their tax money, they have all kinds of reasons why they're not making it. Absolutely. And again, these are the people who supposedly are the self-reliant ones. This is part and parcel of the whole, like, I believe in, the government isn't any good, that's why I'm running for office, right? Yeah, to prove it. Right, because you get all the credit but deflect all the blame, you have less empathy for people who, for whatever reason, aren't able to stand on their own 2 feet and project victimhood. Right, because you don't recognize that you're actually being, you're using victimhood in your own way, It's like I don't believe in identity politics because I'm white. You're like, isn't that an identity? What kind of white person are you? Just generic white. Oh, I see. So you don't know anything about your race. You don't know anything about your history. You don't know where your family line came from. You don't know the struggles of, what kind of white person you are, or what, or whether your, relatives were, a group of dominant whites who were harmful to, the fiefdom of Eastern European whites or whatever. Like, that kind of crowd. Like, billionaires do have it hard. It's very rough, Amos, and I'm glad that you have an empathy for them, of all people. I think it's very big of you. I do. My main complaint, Sixes, is that the end of the chapter house and the epilogue scene. Okay, you're talking about Dune. Ready? Nerd alert. Bye, Jamie White. Be well. Yeah. Yeah, I got to get going too. Oh, yeah, we've gone well past this one. This is a long one. Thank you guys for sticking around. Yeah, I heard someone say they support Trump because they're proud of being white, and I'm like, what are you proud of? That was luck of the draw, not an acknowledgement. You can be proud of your heritage, but the weird thing is, and Ginger, I'm sure you've seen some of this too. Maybe some of you, like I travel a lot. When you go through the South, like the people with the white pride, like flags and that kind of stuff, have the most garbage in their yard. You know what I mean? Like, your house is a mess. You are a wreck. It's the, and again, it's the, like, horrible physical shape, bad English, hygiene issues, cars rotten, and then, and yet white pride. Like, how are you showing said pride? I'm not seeing any of it. I don't think even anyone can even be proud of their heritage because they have nothing to do with that. Their heritage is accomplished. You can be proud of where your parents came from. You know, you can honor your parents and your grandparents and that kind of stuff. And I do think there is something to, to heritage. That's okay. You know, it's just that, yeah. Oh, this guy's a hoarder, right? I just think it's like super. You know, if you're gonna go white pride, like you better be a damn fine example. And the other thing is like, what are you, German? Are you English? Are you Irish? Are you Scottish? Are you Scandinavian? Are you Italian? Are you Turkish? Are you Spanish? You know, like what kind of white are we talking about? And why are you are you proud because generic white? Well, I don't know what the hell that is. Or are you proud because your great-great-grandfather, was, or your great-great-grandmother for that matter, was an Irish indentured servant who, escaped indentured servitude to their, English lord, and ultimately, hi Vadim, you gotta type in English, dude. So, there's a in Spanish, there's a reason why Trump is waiting for this guy to die to stop being a drain on the government. He's proud to support him. I just don't get it. Ginger Boy is one of my favorite hypotheses that Tom Hartman posts is that billionaires are also hoarders. They just don't hoard junk. They hoard money. Yeah, I'd agree with that. Spanish, those are the reason Trumpists want to build a wall. No, Mexicans are why they want to build a wall. Spanish is the language. White pride unless you're a Jew or gay or liberal, right? That's right. I have liberal heritage too, and I'm proud of my parents for that. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with going, yeah, I'm interested, and we were all just talking about our DNA before. You can be proud of where you came from. You can be proud of your family line. You can be proud of them wherever they are. Just be aware of what you're proud of. Like, just your generic color seems a bit weird, unless it's been degraded in some abstract. And then, of course, there's a reason to for people of color, especially in this country, to stand by each other, because of over time they're kind of being grouped together, lumped in there. But I also even think that in that case, it behooves everybody to know as much about their heritage background as well, as much as they can. And that's one of the problems with when people were forcibly brought over, is that they lost track of that, right? As much as you can find out about it, there's it helps shore up your argument for your pride in yourself, that kind of thing. Let's see. How about interviews? You can also do an interview with Jack O'Connell and George Clooney did on Money Monster to get an answer, which was he lied. I'm not sure what that was in relation to, but okay. Yeah, I had a beautiful young female server in a Mexican restaurant in Dallas. We ordered Negro Modelo and Topo Chico, and she said, "Where are you from with those funny words? I'm white." What? That's really weird. The only reason they don't want people to speak Spanish is because they don't understand it and are too lazy to learn another language to figure it out. I do think they feel like they're being invaded, and that's why they don't, that's that dude freaking out, in New York, and then that dude arresting people for speaking Spanish near the Canadian border. Like those people, where do you think they snuck from? I speak Spanish and I'm white. My husband speaks English and he's Hispanic. Yeah, Spanish is an Indo-European language, though. It's not the native language of Mexico. And it's as, Spanish is, the equivalent, Spanish spoken in Mexico and then in southern part of the United States is the equivalent of Quebecois French being spoken in Canada, really. That's an unpopular opinion. That's one of my unpopular opinions, in case you know. Yeah. They invaded first, and then they invaded and changed the laws to English to steal land and property. What they fear is karma. Well, I mean, you can argue that that Spanish becoming the language was the effect of Spanish, you know, invading the South America. You know, that Spanish is not a natural language to the continent at all either, any more than English or French. So it really, we're talking colonial languages all the way across. Skin cancer is my greatest fear. Oh, well, it's a concern. Just make sure you're taking enough vitamin D, because if you're not getting any sun, you're not producing enough. So, and your body produces